Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. You see, back in the day, in 2009, I went to the Creation Museum. I was 19 years old. I was very autistic, and you'll see that on full display. I was very Southern, and, just very young in general. I was about to go off to college. It was going to be my first experiences in the real world. And I think what's most interesting about this is if you watch this video and some later ones I'm going to show in other videos, you'll see a big change in just a couple years from how I was to how I became, and the thread of me will become more apparent. But I know you're not that interested in me, so let's talk about the Creation Museum. The Creation Museum is a museum built by Answers in Genesis, a fundamentalist Christian organization that believes the world is 6,000 years old and dinosaurs existed. There is a lot to it, and I went with a secular group called the Secular Student Alliance, and P.Z. Myers, a professor from the University of Madison, Wisconsin. At least I think that's where he's from. I didn't get to see him that day. He went early. My biological father was more interested in smoking a joint and getting too high to drive before we went, so I ended up with the later group. But it was an interesting time, and I did a couple videos about it, so we're going to watch maybe one of those, maybe two of those. We'll see. And I hope you enjoy. It was definitely an experience, and honestly, this is kind of embarrassing, but I was also kind of right, so let's see how it goes.
Creation Museum today. Today is August the 7th of 2009. We went to the Creation Museum. Who's we? Well, me and about 285 atheists and secularists from the Secular Student Alliance. Yeah, I had to look at the little ticket they gave me here. We went to the Creation Museum. That's 285 atheists, including me, I'm pretty sure, or secularists too. Not to say everyone there is an atheist. Just probably most.
Fun fact, there was actually at least one Christian with the group of secular students. Apparently he was a Christian who believed in a secular society, and despite being a Christian, believed in, science in general. So, very interesting guy. At one point, he almost got kicked out for wearing a shirt that had a Bible verse on it. Now, it wasn't making fun of anything. Again, he was a Christian, but he was wearing this shirt with a Bible verse on it. And they literally made him turn it inside out, despite it just being a Bible verse, because they thought he was making fun of them somehow, but he was not. So that's interesting, I guess.
How this got started was P.Z. Myers was going to do a talk for the SSA, and they ended up reaching an agreement in which they would go to the museum with a couple of friends and invite people. And it turned into something much bigger, and people could freely sign up, and there were 285 people that signed up last I heard. So, 285 people, I guess you could say. I probably met about 100 of them.
Fun fact, despite being incredibly autistic, I was also incredibly social. So when I say I met 100 people, I probably did meet about 100 people that day.
And very few creationists I actually interacted with more than just commenting on the dinosaur hovering over their head, or the dinosaur hovering behind them, or the dinosaur that looked like it was about to eat their head.
I did mention stuff like that to a couple people. I was like, hey, better watch out, there's a dinosaur behind you, and they found it kind of funny. It's cringe in retrospect, but at the time it was kind of cute.
Stuff like that. Here's how my trip went. I'm going to try to sum this up as quickly as possible. I know it's going to suck, but I'm going to try to go as fast as possible with this one, okay? Here goes nothing.
Here's another important note about this video. So, again, I went to it with like my biological father and my younger brother, and when I was recording this video, my father kept coming out and interrupting me. I think he was doing it deliberately just to be annoying. But at the very end of the second video, I kind of like, got him back a little bit. So let's see if we watch this one, then we may get to that one.
I joined a little group of atheists because we were split into groups, and the first place we were going to go was straight into the exhibits, but the line was too big, so we went into this one room, and there was a woman sitting around a campfire, and there was a desert around her, and there were two angels that came out of nowhere. It's magic. Actually, it was on TV, so I can't say that. These angels came out of nowhere, proceeded to...
I do not remember this at all, but maybe I will once I've given more information to myself. So let's see.
Show this woman that God was real by showing her how he did things and what the Bible says. Really convincing stuff, let me tell you. And the most annoying part of that was that it shot water on us. But we were giggling and laughing throughout the whole thing because, and especially during this moment, one of the things they said was that scientists go into science with preconceived notions about what must be real, and that's why they did not allow creationism in schools, because they go into science and they know how it is, and that's just that. If you just
I do remember this part. There was like that trope about, scientists hate God, so they go into science to disprove the idea of God and prove it using evolution and such, which is just frankly a silly perspective. You don't have to be an atheist to be a scientist. You don't have to be an atheist to understand that evolution is true. I know plenty of creationists who do. I mean, my older sister, she is a fundamentalist Christian in most ways, and yet she understands evolution is real. I think my mom does too, but I think she keeps that on the down low because of her social reputation. But she seems to understand to a basic extent that the world is not 6,000 years old. Even my dad, who is like super Christian and thinks humanity is 6,000 years old, also thinks the world was older than 6,000 years. So I think these Answers in Genesis people are really the fringe of fundamentalist Christians.
disagree, you can go somewhere else, do something else, and it's censorship or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what their argument was there, but they said that scientists go into a scientific field with bias. It turned into the irony museum there for a second because I thought it.
That's a pretty good line. I like that. The Irony Museum, or the Ironic Museum. Side note, I have been back since then, so I am more familiar with it currently than I would have been if I'd done this video like a few years ago.
It was creationists who made shit up around their fictional stories, not scientists. Okay, well, after that, we were about to go into the museum, finally, but we heard the talk by Jason Lyle, whose name is spelled Lasle.
It sounds like I was saying Lasle, but it's Lisle. I'm just a very southern person and was a lot more southern at this point in time.
Heard that his talk, The Ultimate Proof of Creation, was coming on, and we figured that PC Myers would be there, so we just got in line. We were some of the first to get in there. It was a very interesting experience, to say the least. That is, to say the least. I looked for PZ during the whole thing. He wasn't in there.
I really wanted to see PZ Myers, but my father, I think, messed that up on purpose too. I think he was just like trying to be as annoying as humanly possible. He did that kind of thing. I don't talk to him anymore because he's kind of a creep, I guess you could say. Talking about my biological father here, I'm good with my adoptive dad. He's great. My adoptive dad is a fundamentalist. He's a preacher, pastor, runs a church, used to be a televangelist, a TV preacher. My biological father is an atheist, or at least very agnostic. Either way, he sucks, and I don't talk to him anymore because he's just a creepy person, and very much like, I don't know, he's got like a chip on his shoulder the size of the moon. So don't talk to him anymore. He kind of ruined my life more than once. Fun fact. Don't know if you want to hear about my grievances, but let's continue.
I couldn't find him. I looked all around the place, just couldn't find him. But
I was so sad. Look at me. I'm about to cry. Like, oh.
it was a fun experience because Jason Lyle had the ultimate proof of creationism, and I didn't see any proof of anything, ultimate or otherwise, proof of anything for that matter. So I just wonder why he titled it that. He just pointed out logical errors that people often use. And, sorry, there's a car over there. He pointed out logical errors that people often use, but he did not know that he was also making a ton of logical errors in his own talk. I found this incredibly annoying. So here's how the seating went.
It was incredibly annoying. I don't remember much of that talk. I don't know if he still does it. When I went there, I didn't see anything about it. Jason Lyle probably still is an Answers in Genesis person. There may still be that sort of talk. But as I remember it, the ultimate proof of creation was not really a proof of like anything. He just said, atheists think this and they're wrong, and we think this and we are right. There was no proof. It was not satisfying at all, and quite frankly, it was a waste of about an hour.
There were 3 atheists next to me, or secularists, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to call them atheists. I don't give a shit. Then there was this old guy, Christian person. Then there were 2 more atheists. And we all spoke during the thing and giggled.
Jason Lyle had to keep saying, please, be quiet, everybody. Please. I really at one point thought he was about to go, please, shut the fuck up. But he didn't, so there's that. But But I really felt like he was going to do that at any second because we were laughing and we were talking to each other, and he was not having a good time.
Amongst ourselves. The guy next to me didn't really giggle except for when they were making fun of evolution, which I thought was pretty interesting. Let's see.
That facial expression reminded me of something that... What does that remind me of? I'm going to have to figure that out. That facial expression. Who does a facial expression like that? There's some movie or something I'm thinking. Oh, wait, I know. There Will Be Blood. The main character in that movie does, like, you know, sorts of things.
What was also notable? Oh yeah, here's something that was really notable about the talk. It had no substance, clearly, so it doesn't matter. I was falling asleep in my seat. I'm a bad example. There was this bar 4 feet high. I had my feet on top of it. I was thinking...
Speaking of bars, you know, when I was there, the main thing, I was 19 at the time, I couldn't drink anyway, but the whole time I was there, I was just thinking, I really wish I were drunk right now. I was pretty high. I did smoke with my father that morning, and it was some good stuff too. So it's pretty high, and I think it showed, like, the whole day I was there, like, I was pure chaos, let's be honest. And I go into that a little bit more in the next video. There's 2 parts to this. But yeah, I was high as shit, but I was like, I should be drunk for this, like, but then if I had been, I probably would have gotten kicked out really quick, so probably good that I wasn't, but you know, it's definitely like the kind of situation where you're just thinking, man, I could use a stiff one right now.
Thinking I'm going to get thrown out of here, but I don't care. It's not a very good talk anyway. And I guess as we were leaving, this guy noticed a comment I made, which was the one I made before about no proof at all, ultimate or otherwise. And he started talking to me about Jesus, which I didn't really expect, since there were so many of us. I didn't expect to be called out in specific, but I was. So I just...
So it should be obvious that I have always been a loud person, and I've always been very obnoxious in public, and I talk a lot. I mean, I've dated multiple people who have told me, you talk too much. And it didn't work with those people for obvious reasons. Thankfully, the current person I'm with, who I hope to be with for a long time, doesn't think that. But yeah, I can talk your ear off like nobody else. And I guess that's why the guy singled me out, because I was the one doing the most talking. I do remember that. And I remember him talking to me about Jesus. And I'm not sure if I'm about to say it in this, but I do remember also telling him that, you know, this is not the first time I've heard about Jesus. My dad is a preacher, okay? I've read the Bible multiple times. I said something like that, and I know the full story of Jesus. I just don't buy it.
Went with it, and I talked to him for a few minutes, and then I went on a quest looking for PZ, who probably left the museum right about that time. Yeah, I didn't get to see him at all through the whole...
I found out later he had actually left much earlier. Like, we got there like probably like 3 hours after he left. So, yeah, thanks for that, Father.
Whole trip, but it was still fun. I gotta say, the museum is well made for being completely full of shit. It's really well made. I loved it. It was fun. It was like going to Disney World or something. It was fun. I'm serious. If you ever get a chance to go to the Creation Museum, don't think I'll be giving them my money or whatever. Just go. It's cool. It's fun. Your money doesn't matter at all, really. That's how I look at it. There were...
Hey, man, if you gotta have fun, you gotta have fun.
280 of us.
Okay, so this video ends kind of early because, again, my father interrupted. He kept doing that. It was very annoying. I kept telling him, hey, could you please stop? I'm just going to do this for a few minutes, but he would not stop. But, you know, what are fathers for other than being annoying and getting you too high before going to a museum? Quote-unquote museum. Now, what I said there was true. The place is fun. It's fascinating. It's a wild, wild time. And I did like it. I did enjoy it. But not for the reason that most people going there would be enjoying it. I enjoyed it because I thought, this is by far the most ridiculous, silly thing I have ever seen. It was such a spectacle, you know. Society of the Spectacle, I think, was that Guy Debord who wrote that? Society of the Spectacle talks about spectacles a lot, obviously. This was not exactly that kind of spectacle, but it was something resembling that. And let me tell you, it was wild, but, you know, everybody was pretty nice. I mean, like, even, you know, the Christians there, I think they wanted to make a good impression on the atheists and skeptics and non-believers. So they were nice to us. I mean, The people who worked there were nice. The other guests were really nice. Everybody was nice. There was no big conflict or anything like that. Now, the cultural attitude has shifted since then. There are more open, non-religious people now. It's not as uncommon as it used to be, but politics have also made us all very hostile towards one another. And I think that's a bad thing. I like to be friends with everybody. I don't care what you believe. If you're a decent person, I like you. So I do kind of wonder, like the last time I went, though, I didn't really interact with anybody because I was sick and trying not to cough. And because it was like, COVID was still a thing. I didn't have COVID. I just had like a cold or something. But I was trying not to cough. So I didn't really talk to anybody or anything. Nobody knew what I was there for. And I just went through the museum and checked it out. Next time I go, I might do something a little bit crazier. We'll talk about that another time. I do have this group that I recently met, thanks to this channel, which is called the Louisville Atheists and Skeptics. And they do a podcast, which is really cool. It's called Blasphemy in the Bluegrass. I think I'm going to do an episode of that soon with them. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm thinking like maybe we should all go together, me and the Bluegrass Atheists. We should all go together and check it out and see what's up, make some videos about it, do another podcast about it. I don't know when that'll happen or if that'll happen, but I'd like to make it happen. So let's hope for the best. And since this video is actually kind of short right now, let's just add in that other one. Let's just transition to the other video and see what else I had to say.
$10. That gave them, I'm bad at math, $2,800.
I don't know why it starts off there. I think that I thought I was recording when I wasn't, but put it up anyway. So there's your explanation. I was talking about how much money they made from us. We got a discount. They gave us a discount for coming. They give groups discounts, but like we got a bigger discount than normal because they really wanted to impress the atheists, which they did not.
That's a drop in the bucket compared to the over $100 million they've made since starting in 2007. Throughout my trip, I was a rebel. I pretty much ran straight through that thing, taking pictures, snapping them like crazy, snap, 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 every which direction, pointing out the dinosaurs around people, and it was fun doing that. And I would make fun of the exhibits, and no one would think I was. I talked to maybe 3 creationists during the duration.
I think one thing about me is I've always had the sarcastic kind of deadpan humor more than any other kind. So when I was making fun of these exhibits, I was doing the deadpan sarcastic thing. And either the creationists didn't notice or they didn't care. I think they didn't notice, probably. I guess it can be kind of subtle sometimes, despite the fact I was less subtle in these days. But as I remember it, I was doing the deadpan sort of thing, the British kind of humor thing. So they didn't get it, but I wish they would have, because that would have made the whole thing a whole lot more funny.
Of the trip, that there was a second.
Let's go back a second. I just want to point something out here because it's kind of cute.
One creationist during the duration of the trip.
During the duration of the trip. Talk about redundancy. During the duration of the trip, things were durable. That's a different use of that sort of term, but okay, whatever. I messed that one up. Don't judge me.
That there was a second one during that time where he said that he disagreed with our views, but he hoped that I enjoyed my trip, and that he also said something about, I bet you can at least agree that the museum is well made. And yes, I can. It is a very well made museum. It's very convincing. It's just full of shit. But that's
so I do have a thought here that, yes, the museum, if you can call it that, I wouldn't really, but it is called the Creation Museum, so I'm just going to call it a museum anyway. It's not a proper museum at all, obviously, but it's more of a creationist propaganda exercise. So, I mean, there's a lot I could say here about the Creation Museum, and I think one of the things I've learned recently is kind of telling. Now, I could have learned this at the time from my father's reaction. My father isn't an idiot. I mean, he knows, like, about science and stuff to some degree. He's not as knowledgeable as me, but, like, he is knowledgeable to some extent, to a basic extent. And I don't know if he was messing with me or what, but he found it kind of convincing. And that's an experience I had recently, because a couple months ago, my mom and my sister and my niece all went to the Creation Museum with a church group. And when they got back, they were telling me how, I guess compelling it is, how it provides evidence, and it contrasts the scientific view with like the creationist view, and answers those questions. So I think what could be said here is this: if you don't know enough about science, if you haven't read enough about science, If you don't understand these concepts very well or at all, the Creation Museum is probably extremely convincing because they go to amazing lengths to try to misrepresent and misinterpret science and what science says. Because creationists don't really understand science that well. And if they did, they'd probably still do the same thing, honestly. So I think it's very important that if people go to places like this, before they do, they learn as much as they can about the actual science if they don't just want to be propagandized too. So when my mom came back, I think she was fairly convinced by it, but she doesn't know a lot about science. And that's unfortunate. But there are a lot of people like her, and there are a lot of people out there who feel like that. So I think the job of educating other people is very important, and I am incredibly grateful that people like Professor Dave and Forrest Valkai and others are out there doing that. They are very much needed in these times.
That's not important. What is important is I ran through the place. I'm a bad example. Don't follow my example. Don't run through the place. Walk through the place. Don't get kicked out like
I did literally run through the place. Not proud of that. I was excited, though, just ready to go and kind of high, so.
probably would have in any other circumstance. The flood annoyed me to death because there was a kid and her mom kept telling her stuff that wasn't true, obviously. It was sad. I got sad there. I got sad.
I remember that very well. It did make me very sad, and I just thought, this kid is curious because the kid was asking questions, very good questions, and I just thought, I was just imagining how different it would have been if I had been the kid's parent and answering these questions and giving, real answers and good answers. And that did make me sad because I just thought, if I were a parent, I couldn't do this to my child. I could not fill my child's mind with propaganda from this ancient book of nonsense. So yeah, I got very sad about it, actually.
Sad every time I heard it come out of some parent's mouth that this is how it really happened. It just bothered me so much that the lack of knowledge these people have of science and the stuff it has done for us that makes it worthwhile, especially evolutionary science, which is the foundation of modern biology. But
seems like a lot of creationists don't understand this or don't care to understand it. But yes, evolution is the foundation of modern biology. It is the thing on which modern biology rests. Pretty much every medical advancement we have is thanks to our understanding of evolution at this point in time.
During the ARC-based exhibits, I was a bit of a rebel, honestly. I was like Sid Vicious there for a moment. I was a rebel as hardcore as it gets.
You could tell I had the punk in me. I was still a metalhead mostly at this time. I've evolved into mostly a punk since then. I mean, I got Fucked Up, Hidden World over here, the greatest punk album of all time. I got Black Flag, Slip It In up here. I got Scowl's Psychic Dance Routine EP, which is more alternative, but it's still really good. And I got over here next to my sheets, right in that area, I've got a bunch of different vinyl from a bunch of different bands like World Peace and stuff. So I was a young punk, and I'm now an old punk.
There was a sign that said, "Do not touch." Yeah, I touched the sign, I touched the exhibit, I took pictures of it. As I said, I'm a bad example. Don't follow my example. I know I'm a horrible person.
I don't know why they had things that said "do not touch" because there was really nothing to touch there. So it was just there was a sign that said "do not touch" propped up on some wood, and there was nothing to touch. What did they want us to not touch? What should we have not been touching at that moment? Were we just not supposed to touch the sign or the wood under it? What were we not supposed to be touching? I feel like that sign belonged somewhere else.
And I'm sure the Creation Museum would agree in full. After all this stuff, the Hall of Death and Sin and Corruption and Greed and whatever else
Communism. They had a big thing about communism and Nazism and how bad those things are. I didn't find the communism one to be especially compelling. The Nazi one, of course I do, but it was an odd experience. I mean, they kind of misrepresented communism. I'm not a communist anymore. I used to be. I'm not anti-communist either, but I really felt like they did communism dirty there.
They had in there. It was a pretty horrible experience from a knowledge perspective, but it was pretty fun from any other perspective, entertainment or whatever. After that, I went outside.
I would totally encourage everybody to go to this place. To this day, I would encourage everyone to go to this place. It is so entertaining. I mean, it's like stepping into Bizarro World if you've never been exposed to this stuff. Even if you have been exposed to this stuff, it's like stepping into the Twilight Zone or something. It's like stepping into an alternative dimension you never knew existed. It's like stepping into the brain of a fundamentalist, evangelical, young Earth creationist. Sorry, I keep scratching my nose. It's itchy. Got some allergies going on. But yeah, the whole place, it's fascinating. It really is like walking into the mind of Ken Ham or somebody like him, complete with like the misinterpretations of the evidence, the misrepresentations of the evidence, the not understanding the science, and of course the ideological stuff about how bad communists are, and the much more appropriate stuff of, how bad Nazis are, because yeah, Nazis are terrible.
And walked around this big lake looking for my ride. And
Gotta love that shade. I mean, again, my father was just messing with me this whole trip. Very odd person.
uh, I talked to some Amish looking people. They had on like Amish clothes.
Mennonites, that's what they were. I don't think I remember it in this video, but like Mennonites. Um, they were nice people. This Mennonite girl who was like my age, she kept looking at me, and it was very odd how she was looking at me. Like, I was mostly talking to her mom and explaining, like, how I disagreed with the museum and all that, and very receptive, but obviously disagreed with me. But the daughter, who was like my age, kept like looking at me, and it was very confusing because on the one hand, there were kind of looks like, wow, what a weirdo, but there were also like looks of like, I guess, admiration because of how well I knew my stuff even back then. And I kind of wonder sometimes like what happened to those people. I'm sure they're still Mennonites. Maybe the girl left. I don't know. Maybe I opened her mind by knowing so much about so much. And I mean, we talked for a long time. That was like a good, 30, 40 minutes of just talking about like hard science and stuff. And it was an interesting experience. I enjoyed it. They were nice people, so I got nothing against them. And it's funny though. I've actually met more Mennonites in recent years in the most unlikely of places. I take Amtrak a lot. I've done probably 20 coast to coast trips between like California and New York City, where I have lived in both, and to Kentucky and all that. And it's a long trip. It's like 72 hours. And pretty much every Amtrak venture I have been on, whether it's, West Coast to East, East Coast to West, New York City to Kentucky, Kentucky to Cincinnati, there's always Mennonites on these trains. And so I've gotten to talk to my share of Mennonites over the years.
So I asked them, "Are you guys Amish or something?" And they said, "No, we're something else." And they were apparently from Missouri or something like that. I don't know where they were from. I didn't really care. They said that they were like Amish people, only they could drive. Like, that makes any sense. But I wasn't in a position to judge. I was in the dumbest museum that has ever existed. I couldn't say,
My apologies on being ableist there, but let's be honest, it is kind of a dumb place.
"Oh, that's dumb." I wouldn't say it anyway, but I couldn't be like, "That's
I think things have changed in a sense because today, if like I were talking about this stuff with someone and they said something that I considered dumb, I would say that is dumb. But I don't really use the word dumb anymore like that. I think it's kind of insensitive. So I'd use some other word, maybe that's less stupid. Something like that. Something that doesn't like demean other people. We all change. And back then, in these days, I was not a bad person, but I was kind of an edgy person. Um, just finding my place in the world. And I did come from like the middle of nowhere, very sheltered, despite being very scientific minded. So I was a very different person. We all grow. Um, so I can't really complain about that. But these days I would definitely be like, yeah, that's stupid.
incredibly dumb that you can use cars but nothing else?" I couldn't say that because I was in a place that believed the Earth is 6,000 years old, believes that it was created in 7 days, didn't have any explanation for starlight that I'm aware of, claimed
At this point in time, I think the main objection I usually had to young Earth creationists was that there is the problem of starlight. I mean, we can see starlight from really far away. The observable universe is something like 90 billion light years across, which means that we can see technically about 45 billion light years in any direction because of the dilation of the universe over time. And so, I mean, it's only 13.8 billion years ago, but like when we look back at this stuff, we're looking back so far that we're looking at stuff that's like literally 45 billion light years away, or appears to be from our perspective. So that's a big problem for like creationists. They don't have a real explanation for that. because if the Earth is 6,000 years old, that light would be nowhere near us. We wouldn't even be able to see Sagittarius A star at the center of our galaxy because it's like, what, 20, 30,000 light years away? Wouldn't be able to see it. Wouldn't be able to see a lot of things. Wouldn't know about Andromeda. Wouldn't know about the other galaxies. Wouldn't even know we're in a galaxy, probably. We'd probably just think our universe was full of gas, dust, and stars all the way through. So that's a big problem for young Earth creationists. I don't really do the young Earth creationist thing anymore. I find them kind of boring. But back then, my main concern was young Earth creationism.
That dinosaurs were alive until after the Great Flood that covered the entire planet, and believe that evolution is not true, but it happens really fast after the flood.
Yeah, that is a thing that they did say at that time. I looked for exhibits that said that last time I went, but I didn't see any there. So I don't know if they changed that or if I just didn't look hard enough. But back then, yes, they did actually say that evolution happened rapidly after the flood in some species. And I always wonder how they squared that circle.
That's another thing that really got on my nerves. During Jason Lyle's talk, he denied evolution explicitly, then stated that right after the flood, species evolved fast. How does that work? I am unsure. It just seems like they were pulling shit out of nowhere. I didn't like it
Because that's exactly what they do, in fact.
that much. It was entertaining, but it was disappointing. I knew what to expect though. I'm good. And
Actually, let's be honest. I didn't really know what to expect, but like I knew to expect like badness. So I wasn't surprised by anything that happened there, really. But like, it was bad. It was worse than I expected, for sure. I didn't know what to expect, really. I thought I did, but I was wrong.
and it was just a pretty good experience overall. I didn't get to see PZ. I'll say that again. I did not get to see PZ. I really want.
I was so sad about it, man. I was so sad because like back then, PZ Myers was a pretty big voice in the atheism community, and I think PZ Myers ended up shaping a lot of like my own views on things because at this point in time, I was pretty left wing and progressive, but there were certain things I wasn't sure about. Not things I was against. I was never like a Gamergate kind of person or anything like that, but there were things that I was uncertain about. For example, I'm sure many of you who were around at that time remember the Dawkins incident, where I think it was Rebecca Watson who was at some kind of convention and a guy cornered her in an elevator trying to hit on her, and she felt very disturbed by it, made a post about it, and it became a big thing. PZ supported her, and then Richard Dawkins came to the comments of his blog and just complained about it by comparing her to a Muslim, like saying that it was the Muslima post. He was saying like that, women in the Middle East deal with so much worse. Why are you complaining? And nobody liked that. But he did have his defenders too. At the time, PZ, I think, was on Free Thought blogs. And Free Thought blogs, just after that, added in Thunderfoot, another famous YouTube guy who's like a anti-creationist. And he was doing a lot of science videos, but he switched his content around. He ended up being like a super anti-feminist. And Thunderfoot did two terrible posts, like some of the worst writing I've ever seen, anti-feminist stuff, sarcastic anti-feminist stuff, got kicked off Free Thought blogs, which is kind of ironic. But I think it was more of a quality issue than his terrible opinions. So that was a big controversy at that time. And you had the atheist camp split between people who wanted atheism and its community to be more progressive and those who wanted it to be more conservative. People who didn't become atheists to be nicer to people or because they were disappointed with religion and what it does. Obviously now a lot of those people have become super conservative and a lot of them became Jordan Peterson people, and that's kind of weird. But ultimately I can say that like, I think that's where I stopped caring so much about the atheist community. But PZ Myers did like change my opinion on like feminism because I had not been super feminist. I had not been anti-feminist, but I had not been super feminist. And I think PZ's response to the whole thing versus like the responses of Dawkins and Thunderfoot, people who I had previously admired, just kind of like showed me the way in a sense. It showed me that I was wrong to be apathetic towards women's rights and feminism and those sorts of issues. That at first, when this Rebecca Watson thing happened, I think it was her, or maybe it was somebody else. Is Skeptic a different person? Maybe it was her. It's a long time ago. But when this thing happened, my first response was to be kind of apathetic, like, oh, it's not a big deal. But then PZ Myers had an excellent explanation of why it was bad. And I found myself agreeing with it. And so I became, I guess you could say, a feminist in a sense. I don't know if I'd really call myself a feminist, but I do agree with every point feminism has. So you could probably call me that. I just don't like labels in general. But yeah, that was a big thing. And so thank you, PZ Myers, for that.
I wanted to see him badly, but I didn't get to, and that's okay. I'll get to see him sometime. It doesn't matter.
I did not, in fact, get to see him sometime. It never happened. Sorry, young me, it didn't happen, but it's not that important. I'm sure he's still out there somewhere.
Uh, I do have a few souvenirs from the museum. Not much, but I do have them. I got this from the SSA. I was there with P.Z. Myers.
I was there. Um, I remember being given these. Like, they were given these. It was the Secular Student Alliance giving these out, but they did give out other things, and I lost a bunch of them. I got a bunch more, but I lost them. So this is pretty much all I was left with. I think there's another thing, though.
Museum, August 7th. And I got this Student Secular Alliance.
His favorite pillow in the hotel.
Oh no! Did you guys hear that? My little brother left his favorite pillow in the hotel. That means we gotta go back. Come on, I gotta go, guys. Shit.
So that was my father's last attempt to ruin my fun, and I didn't let him. I just kind of went with it, made a joke out of it. It's about as good of a response as you can get. So anyway, that was a wild ride, and it's definitely interesting to go back and see these things where you were much younger. It's very odd. It's like looking into an alternative reality, basically, because like that person is gone in a lot of ways, but the threads still run. And, you know, it's just interesting. I mean, aging is an interesting thing. Here I am, almost 34, looking back at myself 15 years ago, nearly half my life ago at this point, when I was just a little thing. And I think this was definitely one of those formative experiences that made me care a lot more about things. So, very important stuff. And, you know, I was about to go off into the world. I was about to go off to university and become who I am. So, it's just some interesting stuff to look back on, I guess. And I hope you enjoyed this little ride through my life. It's a wild one. And, you know, it's cool. If you got any stories about the Creation Museum, feel free to tell them in the comments. I would love to hear your own stories about them, or young Earth creationists, or anything like that. I would love to hear it. And I hope you have a good one. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, here's some pictures.